All right, so the topic of this presentation is blood pressure control beyond the salt. Before we get started, I'd like to talk about resources to use when you're looking for nutrition advice. So one thing to consider is the source, obviously. You have a lot of tools for planning of healthy eating in myplate.gov. The website has evolved a lot and continues to evolve and be updated. So it's a really good source for a start, a commercial free curated starting point for sound nutrition advice. The American Heart Association, when talking about blood pressure, is another very valuable source. And I've put the link in here. So if you're registered for this webinar, then you can be provided with a written record of this as well, so that you can conveniently find this resource, but you can also find it by just Googling American Heart Association diet and lifestyle recommendations. It will pop right up. The third one I'm giving you is harvard.edu nutrition source, the healthy eating plate. That one is not governed, so it is purely science based. Um, it is still written for everybody. It's not written for lay people. It is written really for everybody's use. And just because the government doesn't have an influence over the content of the web page, some people may feel more comfortable with that. If you are using commercial web pages, do look for the credential of RD or RDN in for the person who actually writes what you are reading. Preferably, there would be an MS as well, so that you have an advanced degree for that person. But there are many, many dietitians who do not have an MS degree who are very reliable resources. The reason for looking for this credential is that the terms nutritionist or dietitian are not protected. Anybody and everybody can call themselves nutritionist or dietitian, nutrition expert. There is no protection for that title. There's no guarantee that that person has any clue of what they're talking about. So misinformation on nutrition is very broad. By at least looking for the RD or RDN credentials, you at least have someone who has a national credential, who has passed a national exam, to say that at least at one point they knew what they were talking about. And as I said, the people who hold this credential usually are quite trustworthy, and definitely more trustworthy than anybody without that credential. So let's zoom in on hypertension specifically, as blood pressure is today's topic. The general strategy, and the first thing that your physician tells you when you are diagnosed with high blood pressure, and that's what I will be focusing on, is to reduce your salt intake. Okay, there is, though, a lot more to the general strategy for treatment of high blood pressure with diet and exercise means. One is increase physical activity. If overweight or obese, decrease body weight, stop smoking, reduce alcohol intake. And then come the really big ones that nobody tells you. Increase intake of calcium, potassium, and fiber. The model diet for reduction of blood pressure. And that's only for high blood pressure. It will not reduce the blood pressure below normal. Okay, so if you follow the DASH diet, you will not drop below normal in your blood pressure. You will just treat high blood pressure. Okay, so the model diet is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. It's one of the two best researched diets in the world, together with the Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet is almost even up with the DASH diet for blood pressure correction, and it does all of these points that relate to nutrition. It increases calcium, potassium, and fiber, reduces sodium, reduces saturated fat, and the DASH diet does not include alcohol intake, and we'll get a little bit to that in a little moment. If you wanted to have some flashy trials to go with it, many publications on these trials, they are called DASH and Premier, so that there actually is a very solid research basis for these dietary approaches to treat hypertension. When you compare the success of lifestyle changes, physical activity, smoking, alcohol, and food intake, when you apply these lifestyle changes, you achieve a greater effect than any one medication, and you don't have negative side effects. Okay, any medication comes with some side effect or other. Changes to the lifestyle in this direction that is listed here do not have negative side effects. They do have positive side effects of all chronic diseases that you can think of. So let's take a look a little more closely at the recommendations of the American Heart Association. So a little more specific than what I just laid out as a general strategy in the previous slide. So for energy intake, use up at least as many calories as you take in. That will keep your weight steady. If you need to reduce body weight because you're overweight or obese, then you want fewer calories as you take in, but it also matters where the calories are coming from. Physical activity, at least 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity per week. Now, you may have heard the recommendation to exercise most days of the week, 6 days per week, no more than 1 day, consecutive day without physical activity. What really matters is the sum total in the week. 10-minute intervals count, so if you can't imagine doing 30 minutes in a day, start with 10 minutes in the morning, and these 10 minutes you have already done. And then when you get another 10 minutes after lunch, you take a walk, those 10 minutes count again. So you can break your exercise chunks down into 10 minutes or more intervals for them to be beneficial. We are at a point where we are sitting too much, too long in one stretch. So at a minimum, get up every 45 minutes, walk around for a minute before you sit down again to get at least some health benefit. If you would benefit from lowering your blood pressure or cholesterol, then the American Heart Association recommends 40 minutes of aerobic exercise of moderate to vigorous intensity 3 to 4 times a week. So this is not the weightlifting, this is the cardio or endurance aerobic exercise that makes you a little bit short of breath to the extent that is safe for you. 3 to 4 times a week. So again, your 10-minute intervals count as long as you are a little bit short of breath, breathing a little bit faster, to get the benefits for blood pressure and the benefits for cholesterol. They go together. Eat a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. So you like carrots, you like iceberg lettuce. Try a new vegetable a week. As you go shopping, pick up something that you don't usually eat. Try it. Find a nice recipe. YouTube is there to give you ideas of what to do with the food, and build it into your week to try it. You already eat 50 different fruits and vegetables. Good for you. That's a wide variety. Whole grains and products made up mostly of whole grains. So grains are a difficult topic right now. There is no doubt whatsoever that whole grains have a greater health value than refined grains. Okay. Second point is grains go a lot further than wheat, and by now you can buy a much greater variety of grains than wheat. Now, wheat is in your white bread, your pasta is made of wheat, your pizza crust is made of wheat, and typically these are refined grains. You want to go for whole grains as much as possible. Okay, whole grains give you a wider spectrum of nutrients in the right packaging for your body to get the most benefit out of them. Okay, so mostly whole grains and not just wheat. Healthy sources of proteins, so plants such as legumes and nuts, fish and seafood, low or non-fat dairy. If you eat meat and poultry, try to go for the leaner and, more importantly, the unprocessed sources of it. Liquid non-tropical vegetable oils. So non-tropical coconut oil was something a few years back. We have recovered from that idea. Palm kernel oil, I don't think that ever was really a thing. It is a very saturated fat. Try to go for the non-tropical vegetable oils. Canola is great, sunflower is okay, olive oil, of course, is really good. I listed canola because that is more flavor neutral and thereby more acceptable to a wider range of people. So if you like olive oil, that's great. If you don't, canola is good too. Minimally processed foods. So that does not mean in any way, shape, or form that you should eat everything raw. You do need to process foods to make them digestible. For example, your potatoes want to be cooked. Okay, all the flour products need to be cooked in some way, shape, or form. But there is no need to add a lot of fat and sugar and salt to much anything to make it tasty. Okay, yes, your grains are naturally more bland, and some vegetables really can use some spicing, but that spicing can be with foods that naturally have a very strong flavor. We call those spices or herbs, Or if you mix vegetables with nuts, for example, the nuts provide a lot of flavor to those vegetables who do not have a lot of flavor to begin with. Your meats are, I think, the source of this recommendation to use minimally processed foods, because we have a lot of highly processed meat products on the market. Your cold cuts generally contain a high amount of sodium. They also have additives in them that are certainly not beneficial to health, even though they are not immediately damaging to the extent that it's easy to prove that they are damaging. If you can keep them out of your food, that is better. Okay. So again, cook your food to make it digestible, but try to keep away from the high processed foods. Going back to the grain, your breakfast cereals, think very closely what you want to eat there. When you have all the flakes and puffs and whatnot, think about how they are processed, what has been done to the grain to put these foods into the shape that you're eating them in. You want your nutrition to come from foods in the packaging that nature has provided, because that is what your body is able to handle. So if you extrude your wheat into neat little puffs, they look very fun and there's enough sugar on them to make them taste good, or you're adding the sugar right before you eat it, but it's not in the same shape, in the same context as the wheat was originally. So your wheat wants to be ground, the whole grain, and then processed. Again, cook your food. You do need to cook the flour to make it accessible, but you don't need to extrude it and press it into neat little ring-shaped things to make it good food. Minimize intake of added sugars. I will talk a little bit, a tiny little bit about fructose in a little moment. Added sugars are now on the nutrition label, so you can see how much added sugar is in a food right on the nutrition facts label. Added sugars contain both glucose and fructose, and while in people who are only eating as many calories as they need, fructose is not suspected to do damage. In people who tend to eat more calories than they really need, there is a suspicion that fructose is not the greatest idea. Added sugars don't come with any additional nutrients, and if you have at any point tracked your food intake and broken it down for nutrients in whatever your favorite app is, you will see that it is quite difficult to get all the nutrients you need from foods, not supplement, from foods with a low amount of exercise in our daily lives, right? When we have a low amount of exercise, we have a low energy allowance, and we really need to focus on foods that come with a good load of nutrients. So we really don't have a whole lot of room for added sugars that don't come with any nutrients other than the carbohydrates they provide. Foods prepared with little or no salt. Salt is one of the main focus points of blood pressure control. The older you get, the more salt sensitive you become. So younger people, only half of them are salt sensitive. So for half of young people, adding salt or not does not have an immediate impact on blood pressure. But the older we get, the more we see this immediate impact. And I will try to explain why that is so in a little moment. And then limited or preferably no alcohol intake, live tobacco free. Um, that's not so directly nutrition related. Okay, so let me explain a little bit why the salt is important and how your blood vessel system works, so that you can understand how the blood pressure actually becomes too high. So when you think of blood vessels, you can think of them as a network of flexible garden hoses. Okay, and there are accordingly a number of factors that affect how high the pressure of the fluid in these flexible pipes, if you want, is. One factor is the diameter. The larger the diameter, if the fluid amount is the same, the lower the pressure. Think of putting a thumb on the front of your garden hose. If you reduce the diameter at the front of the garden hose, the pressure of the water will increase and it will spray further, so you can see that. The diameter of your blood vessels is actually defined by the smooth muscles around these vessels. So this is not skeletal muscle. They don't lift anything. This is a different type of muscle, and they are controlled slightly differently, but they can contract or relax. They will contract when you need higher blood pressure, and they will relax to reduce blood pressure. So that smooth muscle tone, the degree to which they are contracted, makes a difference for your blood pressure control. Another point is plaque or atherosclerosis. Though that is a buildup, it is approximately where this blue dashed line is in this left drawing here, where you would start to build up a material, and it starts building up from pretty much the day you're born. And how much you build up in terms of plaque does depend on diet and lifestyle quite a bit. It also depends a bit on genetics, but mostly on your diet and lifestyle. So when you have a buildup in the blood vessel, the diameter is smaller, blood pressure would be higher. Okay. Another point of influence is the flexibility of the blood vessels. Say this blood vessel on the left-hand side here runs into your leg, and then you literally start running. Now you need more oxygen to your leg muscles because they are working, so that blood vessel had better dilate and allow for more blood flow. That flexibility reduces with aging. Aging is a process that is not just dependent on time, it is also dependent on lifestyle, including nutrition, exercise, smoking, and alcohol as major factors. Body weight control is another important factor. So if these lifestyle factors are less than ideal, you're building up more of that plaque than you need to, and the flexibility of the blood vessels decreases. The flexibility of the blood vessels is also influenced by your salt intake, and that is your salt intake over years, over your lifespan. Salt changes the structure of the blood vessels, so it makes them less flexible over a long period of time. It's not an impact factor that you measure after a week. It's an impact that you see over the years. Okay. The last impact factor is how many large vessels, or how many yards of large vessels, if you want, you have compared to the extent of small blood vessels that you have. Small blood vessels feed your tissue. If you have more tissue to feed, you have more smaller blood vessels. So if you accrue fat tissue, that is added to the tissue that you really need to feed, but that fat tissue also needs to be fed. So you're adding small blood vessels without adding large blood vessels. So you have to squeeze more blood through small diameter blood vessels. That increases the pressure that is needed to get through all these tiny blood vessels to get all your tissues fed. So when you have increased fat tissue in your body, you will have a greater chance that your blood pressure is higher than normal. Okay, so again, it's diameter, it's flexibility, and it's also the ratio of large blood vessels to small blood vessels. So your body fat tissue amount that make a difference for your blood pressure. So on the right hand side, the cartoon shows you the cells that line the blood vessels. They are called endothelial cells, just so you have an idea that a blood vessel is really not a garden hose. It's not made of one piece. It's made of many cells that line this blood vessel, and these cells have functions, and these functions are influenced by multiple other factors. So just to demonstrate the plaque here, when you have an artery that doesn't have any plaque, the blood can flow freely. When you have plaque buildup, like here on the right, the blood vessel narrows and the blood has more difficulty to get through, so you need to exert more pressure to get the blood through this artery, so you have higher blood pressure. Okay, the second big factor for hypertension is the heart. And much like you have these various components of the blood vessels, the heart also has a number of factors that affect how much pressure it generates. One is how much fits into the heart. The heart has 4 chambers, and the last one that the blood flows into, the left ventricle, is the one that, when it contracts, pushes the blood into the aorta, so into your blood vessel system that feeds the rest of your body with oxygen and nutrients. When these chambers in the heart are larger, you have a capacity to pump more blood if the heart muscle is equipped to do that. Okay, so the volume of the ventricles makes a difference. How do we enlarge the heart in a healthy way? In pregnancy, the heart enlarges because the heart has to pump enough oxygen and nutrients for both the mother and the infant with just one heart. So the heart grows in a healthy way to accommodate that. With regular cardio exercise, you can also achieve that. So with regular cardio exercise, your heart grows in a healthy way to be able to have a higher output of blood. In contrast, when you have longer standing hypertension, these chambers in the heart can get smaller, and I will show you in the next slide what that actually looks like, because when the heart has to generate more pressure, it has to contract more strongly, so the muscle literally grows. And the muscle can grow to the inside of the chambers, making the chambers smaller, so that with each contraction, you're pumping out a smaller amount of blood. Okay. Next factor is how often does the heart contract? That would be your heart rate measured in beats per minute. How strongly does it contract? The force of contraction, Both of these can be affected by medication to lower your blood pressure. And how much blood does it pump out? So if you fill your ventricle completely and you then contract the heart muscle, you're not pumping out 100%. You're not pumping out all of it. A little bit remains in there so that the next time the chamber fills, you can only add so much, and you can only pump out a fraction of what is in that ventricle. Now, the higher the fraction that you can squeeze out, the bigger the amount of blood you can pump into the body with every beat. So you want that fraction to be large. It does reduce when the heart valves are diseased, dysfunctional, or when the aorta does not allow for a large amount of blood to enter it as the heart contracts. That is called arterial stenosis and has again to do a lot with the plaque that I talked about earlier, with chronic diseases and with chronic salt intake. So the lifestyle factors, exercise, nutrition, smoking, alcohol intake as the main ones, have an effect over a long period on the heart as well. So heart and blood vessels together have to be kept as healthy as possible. And any day that you start with healthy lifestyle changes is a good day for your body. Okay, so I said I would show you what the heart will look like. When the muscle grows to the inside, and that is here on the left-hand side, you see that there is very little space left in the middle of that center, which would be the space where the blood goes. The heart that is shown in the middle is the normal one. On the right-hand side, you have an enlarged heart. This one is for congestive heart failure, so this one is actually diseased. It is very large, but you can see that there's a lot more space theoretically for blood to fill up this muscle. So theoretically, this heart could pump a lot of blood into the body if the muscle were functional. Okay, so those are your physical structures that affect blood pressure, your blood vessels and your heart. And then there are physiologic factors that regulate blood pressure, that tell the blood vessels how much to contract, tell the heart how often to contract, and how strongly to contract. Okay, so you have epinephrine, norepinephrine, formerly called adrenaline and noradrenaline. Beta blockers reduce this signal. They tell the heart, epinephrine and norepinephrine, they tell the heart to beat faster and contract more strongly. That is your fight or flight reaction originally. The opposing force is your parasympathetic signals. That's acetylcholine. When you have just eaten, there is more acetylcholine. It tells the heart to slow down and contract less strongly. That's your rest and digest reaction. So after lunch, typically you slow down a little, and after dinner, certainly again. Then you have hormones that affect your blood pressure. One such system is the renin-angiotensin system. You may have heard about it a little bit in the context of COVID, that messes with the angiotensin II receptor. If you haven't, that's perfectly fine. Drugs that affect this system are angiotensin receptor blockers and ACE inhibitors, two different types of drugs that people with high blood pressure tend to be prescribed. So you have your fight or flight reaction, your rest or digest reaction, hormones, including the renin-angiotensin system, and you have the amount of fluid, and the amount of fluid is influenced by your salt intake. Salt intake increases the amount of fluid until the excess salt is excreted. And we're talking mostly about the sodium part of the salt that needs to be excreted by the kidneys. As I said, sodium does cause changes in blood vessel structure over time, reducing their flexibility so that the heart rate remains higher when the body really wants to lower it. Potassium. You don't want to use potassium supplements without very carefully reading the labels. Potassium can be dangerous, so you don't want to take supplements without following instructions very precisely. Potassium from food, unless you have end-stage renal disease, potassium from food is a good thing. Your body can deal with any amount from food that you can eat in terms of potassium. And I'm talking about food, not about fertilizers or things we add to food. Really, the food is what I'm talking about. Calcium, again, not as supplements, but from food. Your body is equipped to handle the calcium that comes from foods. Potassium and calcium are beneficial for regulation of blood pressure. Sodium is not. Magnesium is the third one that is beneficial. Again, not as supplements. Magnesium is a laxative, but from foods. And I'll get a little bit into where you find these nutrients in foods. So let's talk about how we get that. Again, diets high in fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables give you potassium, magnesium, and calcium in amounts that your body can handle and in a context that your body is used to handle. Foods high in omega-3 fats may have a cardioprotective effect and reduce sudden death. So foods high in omega-3 fats, those are your fish, particularly deep sea fish. You do need to go to the fatty fish to get reasonable amounts of omega-3 fats. And if you don't eat fish or seafood, you can use nuts and seeds for their omega-3 precursor that is in there and celebrated a lot. Chia seeds, flaxseed are celebrated for containing something that your body can transform into the useful omega-3 fats that this is talking about in terms of cardioprotective effect. The plant sources for omega-3 fats are secondary. They are really only second best because the transformation into the useful ones is slow and has a limited speed. Omega-3 fats can be supplemented. So there, when you take a supplement, yes, remain in the limits of what the package says, but there the supplements are actually effective as well, although again, the foods are preferable. So to put that all together, what can your diet actually look like? The DASH eating plan, as I said earlier, is one of the two best researched diets worldwide. It has huge amounts of support that it actually is cardioprotective and generally healthful for the chronic diseases that plague us in the society. So 7 to 8 servings of grain, 4 to 5 servings of vegetables, and a serving is 1 cup raw or half a cup of cooked vegetable. Half a cup of cooked vegetable is what fits into your cupped hand. Okay, 1 cup of raw leafy vegetables, that is a fist. Okay, just to have a measure of how much that is. 4 to 5 servings of fruit. That is 1 medium fruit, quarter cup of dried fruit. Dried fruit are very energy dense, so really watch the amounts there. And half a cup of processed fruits. 2 to 3 servings of low-fat or fat-free dairy foods. There is nothing wrong with full-fat dairy foods in terms of heart health. The fat from dairy products doesn't do any damage. Problem there is that it has to fit into your daily energy allowance so that you don't eat more than you burn. Lean meats, poultry, and fish, 2 or fewer servings, and 1 serving is 3 ounces cooked lean meat, skinless poultry, or fish. There is nothing wrong with fewer servings, and if you look into the Mediterranean diet a little more closely, there are fewer than 2 daily servings of lean meats, poultry, and fish. Nuts, seeds, and dry beans, 4 to 5 servings per week. Fats and oils, fats and oils 2 to 3 per day, and that includes whatever fat you put on your bread, on your bagel, and whatever you use for cooking as well. Salad dressings. Salad dressings are interesting because we have all these low-fat varieties, but when you look at what is in these low-fat varieties, just go back to oil and vinegar. Sweets, 5 servings per week or fewer, and that's your sugar, but it also includes jelly or jam, not so much preserves. They are a little bit better, but they are still generally half sugar. Okay, so let's use a little bit of time to look at the details of how to get the various items. So if you just got to here and now you're fed up, you have a meal plan, you have your resources to go for a healthy diet. What I'm doing now is I'm going into a little more detail on each of them. So for reducing sodium, buy fresh, plain frozen, or the cans with no salt added in terms of vegetables. Frozen vegetables are nutritionally very valuable because they come off the field and are frozen within 24 to 48 hours. There's no loss of nutrients during storage. When you buy fresh vegetables, try to buy them actually produced locally. So farmers markets are great. If the farmers on the farmers market get a specific product from the general market anyway, then you haven't gained anything. But if they sell the produce that they actually produce locally, you reduce the time from the field to your fridge or to your plate. Okay, so that's buy fresh. There is nothing better than to have something from the field on your plate within 48 hours, and these models do exist. Okay. Use fresh poultry, fish, lean meat rather than canned or processed types. Use herbs, spices, and salt-free seasoning blends in cooking and at the table. Experiment with them. Try 1, 2, 3 different ones, see what you like. When you use something like cumin, for example, you can reduce the salt that you need for spinach. Find those recipes, find those tips for the food preparations that you eat often. Run the experiment to wean yourself off the salt. Use half the amount for a week and then use half the amount for another week. And you will find that you're not missing the salt if you're cutting it back gradually. And then when you eat out, all of a sudden you realize just how much salt is in the food that you get from outside sources. It has gotten a bit better lately, but there still is a lot of salt in these takeout foods or foods in restaurants. When cooking rice or pasta or hot cereal, again, wean yourself off the salt gradually. Cut back on instant or flavored rice, pasta, cereal mixes. I know we are inundated with them in the supermarkets. Just go for I buy a package of rice and I cook it myself and I define what flavors go in there and I can make it taste good with very little salt. Choose convenient foods that are low in sodium. Check the nutrition facts label. Anything more than 240 milligrams per serving is not low at all in sodium. Cut back on frozen dinners, pizza, packaged mixes, canned soups or broths. They are notorious for high amounts of salt in them. Salad dressings as well. These often have a lot of sodium. Pickles are another thing that has a lot of sodium, and even though pickle juice is great as a fat-free salad dressing, it does have a lot of salt and a lot of sugar. So while it comes in handy, it doesn't make it particularly healthy. When you have canned foods, you can rinse them to remove some of the sodium. That is part of weaning yourself off the sodium. When available, choose the low or reduced sodium or no salt added versions of foods. Choose ready-to-eat breakfast cereals that are low in sodium. So all of these tips should get your salt below the threshold of 2400 milligrams that you are supposed to stay below. We are all supposed to stay below. And there are added benefits from going as low as 1500 milligrams per day. And just so you can set that in ratio, what we really need is 400 milligrams. So we are always getting more than what we need in terms of sodium and salt. Okay. So you can get all of these at once by using minimally processed foods even when you're not eating at home. Okay, fresh, frozen. If you're ordering in a restaurant and there are vegetables, ask them not to add salt. Ask them not to add salt to your meat piece. You'll add salt at the table as needed so that you get less salt in your food. All right. Easy on the alcohol. I wanted to specify here what that means. Of course, no alcohol is the best. Alcohol is a toxin for our body, but our body does have systems to deal with small amounts of it. So 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men is tolerable. But even the American Heart Association has understood that no amount of alcohol is ever healthy. Okay, so 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks for men is tolerable. Less is better. So what is a drink? 12 ounces of beer, regular or light. Light beer actually still has a considerable alcohol content. 5 ounces of wine, 1.5 ounces of harder liquor. Okay. Now going again into yet more detail, there are some things that are beneficial. One of these things is carnitine. People who exercise a lot may have heard of carnitine as a supplement to promote transport of fat for use as energy. That's what carnitine's function is. We make our own carnitine and we get it from food. You do make it yourself from 2 essential amino acids, so parts of protein that you are using to make carnitine. Some people use it as supplement. That's not really that meaningful because we are making it ourselves. We are getting it from food. But when we don't have enough of it, then it is negative for heart health. So, supplementation for patients with any form of heart impairment, including high blood pressure, is generally positive, but we do need more research to say how much carnitine actually is meaningful to supplement. So for carnitine, if you want to spend money, okay, it doesn't hurt. Whether it helps is questionable. Okay. Another aspect that I hadn't talked about yet is your antioxidant protection. Antioxidants are something that is sold to you, particularly in supplements. It usually is better as everything from foods, and most of the benefits that we know occur when the antioxidants are found in foods, not in supplements. So we need enough iron and copper. Very often people of higher age have too much iron. The people of lower age, children, adolescents, and women of childbearing age tend to have not enough iron. Men, once they have finished growing, typically do have enough iron and get enough iron from the diet, and women past childbearing age as well. Copper is something that we can't assess easily, so we just have to make sure we're taking in enough. Nuts are a great source for copper, for example. Coenzyme Q10 is known to people who are taking cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins. Okay, anything that ends in statin in their name may affect coenzyme Q10. You can buy that as a supplement and take that alongside with the statin. It doesn't do anything to the effect of the statin, and then you can be sure that you have enough of it. Manganese, zinc, copper, iron, and selenium are all needed for antioxidant enzymes. You find them throughout the diet, in meats, but also in nuts, seeds, legumes, and vegetables. Vitamin B12 and niacin, rarely deficient, but it's important to get enough of it. So people who follow a varied diet do have enough of these. People who eat mainly refined flours, sugars, and fat can become deficient in these B vitamins. Sufficient protein with all essential amino acids to build these enzymes. Flavonoids like isoflavones in soybeans, um, green tea, coffee, chocolate. These are foods that we may not usually associate with good health, but they do contribute to the antioxidant protection. So chocolate, as high a chocolate percentage as you can tolerate, because it's really in the chocolate that the antioxidant protection lies, not in the sugar that is used to mix it. Energy demand, again, healthier energy production in people who are active, enough physical activity, not sitting more than 45 minutes in a row. So very briefly, a little bit about specific nutrients. Calcium from foods, not from supplements. When you have a lot of added sugars, you're decreasing calcium intake. Calcium sources, yes, we all think of milk, but it's by far not the only one. You have soy products, you have yogurt, parmesan from the dairy group, but you also have your legumes other than soy, okra, trout, acorn squash, clams, broccoli, kale, leeks, oranges from the fruit sector. Your nuts and seeds are high in calcium. The ones at the bottom here, the baked beans, molasses, and kidney beans, are high in calcium. They also pack a good amount of energy. So be mindful of how much you're eating from them. Baked beans, be mindful of the sugar content. pick some that don't have so much sugar. Thiamine, vitamin A, and vitamin D have an impact on heart health in general. Thiamine, you would only be at risk for deficiency again if your diet is high in added sugars. In this case, refined flours have to be fortified with thiamine, so it really is just the sugar. If there is too much sugar in the diet, you're at risk to not get enough thiamine from the diet. Vitamin A, again, your fruits and vegetables. And then we get to vitamin D. Deficiency of vitamin D is widespread, and usually fish consumption is not sufficient to raise levels of vitamin D. So I'm listing a few sources of thiamine. Generally, you have meats and whole grain that is high in thiamine. When you look at the top 10 sources, you also see the legumes in there. Asparagus is in there. Your acorn squash is valuable for thiamine as well, alongside the whole grain and the meats. For vitamin A, this lists fruits and vegetables. Everything that is yellow or dark green has a good amount of carotenoids that are transformed by your body to vitamin A without any risk of getting too much of it. For vitamin D, fish is the classic source. It is fortified in milk. You now also have fortified juices listed here as orange juice. There is a limited amount of vitamin D in some meats and in some mushrooms. Generally, vitamin D from the diet you get via fortified foods when you need enough of it. We are up north, so we don't get enough vitamin D from sunlight, particularly not in the months between October and March. So there you need the fortified products to get enough vitamin D. So what does vitamin D have to do with blood pressure? It regulates the structure of the heart muscle. It inhibits that hormone system that increases blood pressure. It's anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and suppresses products that cause reduced flexibility in the blood vessels. And thereby it also reduces plaque buildup in the blood vessels. It improves the kidney function, so improves excretion of substances like sodium that you don't want to retain. And it regulates those endothelial cells that line the blood vessels, so thereby regulates blood vessel structure and function as well. So both heart and blood vessels are regulated in part by vitamin D. So it's really important to have sufficient vitamin D from food sources and from the sun combined. Every physical exam that you get, every blood panel these days does measure your vitamin D levels. Take a look at them and do take them seriously. So we get back to the heart healthy diet that we introduced in the beginning. High in fruits and vegetables to get all the nutrients that you need. Whole grains as opposed to refined grains. Healthy sources of protein. Yes, do include meat, fish, and poultry if you are so inclined. It's not obligatory, but it's quite possible to include. Liquid non-tropical vegetable oils, minimally processed foods, minimize intake of added sugars, little or no salt, and limited or preferably no alcohol intake. So what does that then look like? Yes, to reduce the sodium. Here you have your guide of how to put together a plate. That is the healthy eating plate from Harvard. Again, this is not government regulated. This is purely science-based. So it tells you a variety of whole grains. It does not make an allowance for refined grains because there really is no health benefit compared to whole grains that refined grains really have. Healthy proteins, fruits and vegetables to make up half of all the food you eat throughout the day. Healthy oils and drink water. You will see that in the My Plate, there's always dairy. In the Harvard Plate, dairy is not separately listed because you do get all the benefits from fruits and vegetables as well that you do get from dairy. You can express, if you prefer, the same thing as a pyramid. It says the same thing, it's just a different shape. Whatever you can work better with is what you should go by. You see that the basis of the pyramid here is physical activity, healthy weight, and a healthy diet. And a healthy diet is based on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and healthy fats and oils. And all the rest is addendas that you want a controlled amount of. So yes, fish, poultry, and eggs. Yes, nuts, seeds, beans, and tofu, but very little of or smaller amounts of dairy. They say 1 to 2 servings of a day is good, and very limited red meat. More importantly, very limited processed meats. So if you enjoy a steak, but try to stay away from the cold cuts that are so highly processed. Okay, that was all I wanted to tell you in an hour about how to use your food choices to control your blood pressure short term and very long term. So stay healthy and experiment with healthy recipes, healthy foods, move in the right direction one step at a time, one small goal at a time.